Hi, welcome back to God Laughs at Dirty Jokes, book installment, reading 15 and Easter weekend. So happy Easter to you if you celebrate it. Our family's getting together tomorrow to have dinner. Now, it's not a religious thing, but we always get together on Easter, and it's a nice weekend. And it seems to me the last 2, 3, 4 Easters, they have felt different than Easters that came before that. I don't know if that's true for you too, but I have heard some of the psychics say that the energy around Easter, given the biblical notion of Jesus's resurrection, is stronger. Like there's more of that energy in the air, and I believe, like a lot of the psychics believe, that all of the different all of the different religions, they each tap a little bit of the same thing. There isn't one religion that's got every truth, and yet at the same time, books like the Bible and the Quran and other religious books are not entirely false either. It's not an either or thing. It's like they've all captured little essences, little bits of the essence of spirit or higher force, or whatever term you like to use for God. And with Easter weekend, like I said, I have noticed the last couple years that there's been this peacefulness in the air. And Linda G in her video this morning even said something along those lines, like almost like fairy dust sprinkled in the air. You feel this. I feel the calmness and contentedness on Easter weekend the last few years, including this year, that is a little different than the everyday feeling. And I hope that you're feeling it too. And if you have experienced this a few years in a row, like I have, or maybe every year, or you know what I'm talking about, yeah, leave a comment. I'd be really curious to hear about other people's experiences on that. But what I really wanted to share was this photo that I have from Easter 2018. I may have mentioned it before, I'm not sure, but at that time I had 2 cats. I had both Jean and Gabe. And Gabe is still with me, and he has been hilarious lately. He has been so chatty. Just makes me laugh. And he's been really friendly with other people too, which is a little out of his character as well. Maybe it's Easter weekend again. But in 2018, that was the last year I had with Gene, the other cat. And he was 16, and he had a great run, and he had not leukemia. He had diabetes his last 5 years and was getting daily shots, and so he had a great life. I couldn't have asked for more. But Gene and Gabe, they would fight. They would play fight a lot. They were not exceptionally close. They didn't snuggle together. They didn't do any of that stuff. But they always hung out around each other. So it was kind of this sort of like, yeah, I like you a little more than I let on, this type of feeling. You know how that is. But on Easter 2018, Gene's last Easter, this is how I woke up from sleep. If you can see it, that's Gabe's head over here. He's kind of whited out. Oops. But that's Gene. And of course, so this is me waking up on Easter morning in bed with the 2 of them lying on top of each other next to my legs, which was so unusual and just made me laugh so hard because it was so out of character. I think there's one more of the same scene. Yeah. So you can kind of see here again. Here's Gabe's head and Gene's head, and he's just lying underneath. Because Gabe's enormous, so he's just lying underneath him. He's like, yeah, okay, I'll go with this, but only that one time ever on Easter. So maybe there is something to that energy, right? And while we're speaking of tangents, because I like the tangents, I think I'll try to do a tangents video. I've had a few requests for it. I don't know. I may end up losing a bunch of subscribers if I do it, but what the hell. And the way the tangents video will work is I will chit chat and tangent. I'll talk about whatever you would like me to talk about. So if you want to leave me a question in the comment section for this video, or you can even email me something you would like to hear me talk about. It could be spirit related, not that I know everything, because of course I don't, or it could be anything else in daily life if you like, and I'll collect some questions and topics and just do it that way. Sorry, I'm going to adjust the mic a little bit. So I have a few already. You know who you are, and if we get enough for a tangents video, then I'll do it up. Okay? So that's enough of the tangents for this video, and we'll get into the reading. So thanks for checking it out again. I suppose it's appropriate on Easter weekend that chapter 31 is called Does God Cheat? Does God cheat? Okay, here we go. I've had lots of fun, odd musical adventures. I sang with a Buffalo punk band in high school and created obscene cassettes with friends in various joke groups like Chainsaw Bar Mitzvah, Hacksaw Synagogue, Rectal Thermometer, and AIDS, AYDS, it's spelled AYDS, named after the short-lived, unfortunately monikered diet supplement. My brother and I recorded as Vic and Vinnie Maverick when I was 16 and he was 10. I made him sing ridiculous songs that I wrote, like Your Grandma is One Hot Mama and Poop. Yeah, mature, right? When I was 18, I taught myself how to do sloppy Eddie Van Halen-style guitar riffs for a punk parody band called Trainwreck, whose hits were Metal Babe and New Kids on the Chopping Block. In college, I played guitar in a Sundays-style group called Franklin, with my friend Karen on vocals. In my 20s, I was in a group called Plaster Sandals, whose 15 Seconds of Fame was to be named one of the first prize winners in the 1996 Conan O'Brien College Band Search, narrowly missing the grand prize of appearing on the show. 96. Wow. In my 30s, this is humble brag. No, it's brag. In my 30s, I sang Sinatra tunes with an 18-piece big band and accidentally founded a Hank Williams Sr. tribute group that has lasted 10 years. The constant, my true passion through these side projects, has been writing and recording my own songs for 25 years. Of course, now it's 30 and on. I recently released my 8th CD. Now I'm up to 10 and have started on number 9. Me. It actually says that. So I know when I'm being me. But there is a reason for this background. So at the time, like I just said, I sang for a Hank Williams. I sang the Hank Williams tribute for 10 years, but kind of by accident. It wasn't intended to be something that would last, but it did. It lasted 10 years, and it was a really fun band to be in, and I learned yet more about music. I wasn't into country. I just something to do, just something I wanted to try. So here we go. My bearded bassist buddy Jim has been in the All Hank Band. That's what we call it because it was all Hank Williams songs. The All Hank Band, almost from the beginning. He and the other guys have about 10 years on me. It's nice to play with seasoned musicians and cuts down on drama. They've been nice enough to carry me through a few gigs when I hanked it up in excess. Hank Williams liked to stash small liquor bottles in his cowboy boots to sneak a nip, but my standard poison is beer. On one gig that I don't remember so well, Jim told me that I still sounded good, but that the tempos got really slow. Yeah. My friend Noah liked it, for she too had been drinking. Jim eventually had to halt our last marathon set after 2 hours because his back was bugging him and he needed to sit down. I was on quite a roll, apparently. Oh, God, I still remember that night, until I don't remember that night. Oh, musicians. One Friday morning last spring, we four Hanks drove to a restaurant in Arcade, New York, which is a rural area here in Buffalo, to do a live-to-air performance on WXRL, a vintage country station in the Buffalo area. Nellie's is a classic rural diner with a nice staff and good chow. It's fun to call it chow. The room was filled with regulars, plus many older musicians who gather for the monthly radio broadcast, including several pedal steel guitar players. That doesn't happen often because there aren't that many of them. It's a specialty instrument that gives classic country its twang. So do you know pedal steel? It's like it looks like a laptop instrument. It's laid out horizontally, and you play it with a slide, and then there's foot pedals to further adjust the sound. That's the simple explanation. So it's like a guitar. It's like a horizontal guitar, and that gives it the whine, the country whine, or they would even say Hawaiian back in the day. Pardon me. It's very tangential reading already. Okay, so we did the radio show. The Hank Band did the radio show. After the gig, an 83-year-old man named Bernie introduced himself. He had been a country singer in the 1940s somewhere in rural Pennsylvania. Now, this is the fun, of doing what I've done. A local car dealership owner decided to promote country music shows in a large park, and Bernie helped book the headliners while opening some of the shows. In 1948, when Hank Williams was just coming up, they hired him for $1,500. That's worth about $15,000 now. I asked Bernie what he thought of Hank at the time. He shrugged his shoulders and said, he was okay. That made me laugh. I appreciated his honesty. Bernie said that Hank seemed like any of the other emerging guys of the day, not exceptional. Bernie said his chest was caved in, he was skinny as a rail, and either drunk or on drugs backstage, rambling away in conversation. He talked more on stage than he sang. What does that sound like? I said he was pretty tall, though, right? Not so much, according to Bernie. I give Hank a lot of leeway, possibly too much, because I feel like I understand him, and his songs move me, especially the sad ones. Same with Sinatra. They were both extreme manic depressives with neurotic artistic sensibilities and big egos. Each tended to overcompensate for being slight of body, though Sinatra filled out later and imitated the bullies who'd plagued him. Hank's life was complicated by poor health and spina bifida, and I imagine the roads of the mid-1900s were unkind to his back when traveling to gigs. Coincidentally or not, I have an exaggerated lumbar curve that's always made running unpleasant, which is why I swim. Hank died age 29 in 1953, but looked more like 40. On the drive home from Nellie's Diner, Jim asked how my book was coming, this book, and said he might have a story for me. His father died while Jim was doing a New Year's Eve gig in 1978. He said he knew the moment when his dad passed because he could feel it. Jim's sister's watch stopped at 1 a.m. that morning, the time their dad died. This made me think of my mom's visit from her mother at precisely 4 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Remember that chapter? And when George, the comic shop owner, felt his mom's passing in the middle of the night. Jim's mom, Millie, is 84 and was diagnosed with lung cancer in July 2012 after a couple of months of coughing. Having watched friends of hers go through surgery and chemotherapy only to live another 6 months in pain, and given her age, she decided to ride it out naturally. Millie has lived in Mesa, Arizona for 35 years with the rest of Jim's family nearby. Last winter, her condition worsened. In addition to cancer, she developed a severe lung infection with lots of fluid. A drain was installed. She was pumped out every other day. On Christmas Eve, she went to the emergency room. They gave her the strongest antibiotics available, but there was no improvement. Her health was slipping fast, and she enrolled in hospice care. Jim prepared to fly to Mesa to be with her and his siblings. The morning of January 2nd, Millie was about to take a shower when she received a phone call from her sister-in-law informing her that her brother had died that morning from pancreatic cancer. He'd been diagnosed only 3 months earlier himself. Millie had phone calls to make but decided to bathe first. As she stepped into the shower, a scorpion dropped from the ceiling and stung her at the base of her neck into the spine. In her 3 decades in Mesa, she'd never seen one in her house. The sting was quite painful. Her body went numb and her vision blurred. Jim's niece was there at the time and called poison control, but they said there was nothing they could do. She'd have to ride it out, scorpion sting. Millie couldn't believe this had happened to her on top of everything else. For the next 3 days, she was in great pain and essentially blind. Unexpectedly, as the pain from the sting receded, so did the fluid in her lungs. Within a few more days, her lung infection completely cleared. There were no remaining traces. The scorpion sting may have inadvertently saved her life by wiping out the lung infection. She was discharged from hospice care and got back to her normal routine, including driving her car, which she hadn't done since the previous summer before her cancer diagnosis. She turned 84 in April 2013. Jim sent her a silver scorpion pendant for her birthday. Crazy, right? Studies support the use of epidural drug delivery for acute pain, especially to prevent chest infections. If Millie hadn't been stung in the upper body, specifically the spine, the scorpion's venom may not have been as effective. I read online that Cubans have been treating cancer patients with a mixture of blue scorpion venom and water for more than 20 years. Some have seen their tumors shrink and disappear. Thousands have attested to pain relief, increased strength, and renewed energy while on this medicine, and Cuba's state pharmaceutical company has begun producing a homeopathic version for distribution. Did some helpful spirits or Millie's recently deceased brother manipulate a scorpion into helping her? Is this a form of cheating, by spirit? If I were God, I would absolutely intervene. Why not? God made the rules of reality, so who better to break them? Why should God and his angels play fair when the devil's entire enterprise is based on deception? Perhaps angels should cheat more often, though if they did, then people might always expect miraculous solutions to their problems. I often wonder if a larger plan is always in play. Does God manipulate the chessboard towards the end game? Yes. But does the game ever actually end? So that's the end of chapter 31. And based on things that have happened between when this book was finished and then now, I would say for sure there are moments that spirit intervenes. There's no doubt about it. There's a story that I won't tell right now, but I will tell. It'll be in the next book, and I don't mean that as a tease, but it's just such a great story that it is a tangent, and I don't want to go there right at the moment. But definitely, there was a spirit intervention with something that happened with my brother that was a physical interaction that prevented him from harm. And absolutely couldn't have been anything but intervention from spirit. So it's mysterious how they work. I mean, the thought that a scorpion that would cause you all this pain when it stings you, and you're thinking, God, why did this happen to me? Literally, you're thinking, God, why did this happen to me on top of everything else that's going on? Jim's mom lost her brother that same morning, and then 3 days later, she goes from being in hospice care to being essentially cured of a lung infection from a scorpion bite. That's pretty dramatic. It's pretty stunning, really. And I guess that's where we get back to the ideas about faith, which is really hard sometimes when things are not going well, to have faith that it will be okay. But in a case like that, with this particular incident, how else could you respond except like, it's out of my hands, and just trust that the best thing will happen. It's really hard. It does my head in, because it makes my head go in circles. It does that for other people too, I'm sure. But somehow, I don't know, somehow there's still a plan. I don't know how else to put it at the moment. On Easter weekend. So let's stick with the theme. 32, chapter 32 is called Heaven is a Place Where Nothing Ever Happens. And it's in quotes because it's a quote from a song by the Talking Heads. So heaven is a place where nothing ever happens. Those are lyrics from the Talking Head song, Heaven. I've considered the meaning for years, but as with most clever poetic turns of phrase, an exact interpretation is elusive. Still, it kickstarts fun, unanswerable questions like, does time exist in heaven? If there's no time, does anything happen there? Can spirits choose to take physical form? What did they do with their non-time or time, if anything? Does one's essence maintain independence, or do we merge with the original source from which we came? Would heaven's presumably endless peace eventually become boring? Is having a finite physical body essential to understanding the necessity of both ambition and empathy? Do spirits have aspirations like people, or is one detached with nothing left to achieve? Is life a spirit pure joy? If it's like my tickling incident, then the answer is yes. Are we reincarnated over and over again until we learn all a soul needs to know? Don't know. Do spirits make whoopee? Am I very far up my own bum? Quite possibly. Perhaps in the afterlife, we exist as eternal, intelligent energy, but can choose to continue to interact with this universe. Maybe some spirits use their freedom to traverse time and space like a tourist, to visit places and people they loved in the physical world, or to experience vistas they never knew, but from an omniscient point of view. My mom doesn't ponder the afterlife like me. What a shock, right? Does anybody? Most people don't, which is probably smart. I'll do it for you. Her attitude is that there's no way to know anyway. It'll be whatever it is. Obviously true, but I enjoy speculating even though I know I don't know. Mom said she thinks when we die we just exist as atoms floating outside time, not really thinking at all, just being. Sometimes we're called by those we cared about back on Earth, like a quantum phone call ringing in shared atoms, and we momentarily return. She doesn't believe that spirits have any power to assist us. They can only provide a comforting presence in times of need. I feel like spirits do help, though I'd concede that God's will is the final word. So there you go. You're back to faith, I guess. Wow, I'm starting to sound religious, aren't I? In a network of compassionate spirits, they might act as proxies for Jeebus. Not necessarily to engineer a final result, but to favorably tweak some of the variables, slightly bending reality. As mentioned, I believe our altruistic hopes influence existence, as if the universe is a single gigantic being which responds to the needs of its individual organs. We receive answers to our prayers and wishes, though we may not always recognize or like the answers at first. There might be something to that here. It's funny because parts of this book, because it's been so long, I don't even remember writing. I mean, and I know I had an assist from Spirit in writing some of it anyway, but it's funny to come upon the thoughts anew sometimes. Perhaps Mom resists the thought of spirits having an ongoing mission in the afterlife because her life as a caregiver has been challenging and essentially unending since Steve and I were born, which very true. The ideas of duty after death is unappealing to her because it's just more work, which that makes total sense, and even to me. I'd think that all projects in the afterlife would be optional. They better be. Different strokes for different soul folks. For some, perhaps the afterlife is a period of rest from the challenges of the physical universe. Maybe some spirits go into hibernation, an extended dream state of rejuvenation, and then emerge ready for another spin on the flesh carousel. I think that's definitely possible, and I think we've all heard about, it's like saying there are almost like the equivalent of healing centers or hospitals on the other side for people who really need to be nursed back to health emotionally. So I think that all has to be true. There's no reason that that loving spirit wouldn't want the best for us. So it's not like we get to heaven and they just put us to work again. It can't be like that. It can't be like that. It concerns me that Mom still worries about the future. I'd hoped with our amazing experiences she'd trust fate more, but I worry about the future too, so. I fear that obsessive energy adversely affects her health, her pets, and my brother Steve. I can't seem to help her let it go, even in retirement. The only option is to pray that God makes her eventually see things my way. Haha. Having not experienced the responsibilities and burdens of parenthood, maybe my option is void, which is very true. My friend Bob once said that he didn't feel afraid a day in his life until his first child was born. I didn't tell him that fear has been a constant companion since age 13, and that only over the last few dozen years have I grown to feel nearly fearless. Not fearless, but nearly fearless. My brother experiences consistent public discomfort. Life in a wheelchair means you never blend into a crowd. It's probably why he often prefers being alone or with friends at his apartment, as I would. Even without physical handicap, I sometimes retreat, or rather often, especially with COVID. preferring the uncomplicated company of cats to the messy, seemingly unending neediness of people. That's judgment creeping in again, unfortunately. Sorry. So, let's return to afterlife speculation and consider time. Given that psychics, including my brother, can accurately see future events in the physical world, and there's scientific evidence of collective precognition, remember Harvard's Global Consciousness Project and the eggs, that's from an earlier chapter, then the future must already exist in some form. If the future exists, then the past almost certainly continues to exist after we pass through it too. Therefore, all events always exist, and some quantum advocates would say all possible versions of all events exist in infinite number. I'm not sure about that, but who knows? Our fate is already written in this reality, but we've yet to make the choices that take us where we're headed. This is strange and contradictory and not intuitive to us as humans, but existence is paradoxical and absurd. The only way to experience individual moments is through the variable of time. It's the agent of evolution physically, mentally, and spiritually. Time allows us to experience growth, to see life from many different perspectives as we age and change, and in turn, hopefully to help soften our judgment of imperfect others as we acknowledge our own imperfections. The mission is to love despite abundant challenges. Finally, we impart knowledge to the next generation, and then we move on to the next stage of our spiritual journey. If we exist solely as energy in the afterlife without a body and its accompanying needs, we will obviously be very different. Reconciling the trinity of mind, body, and soul on the physical plane is one of the great challenges of being human. Each has different needs, and sometimes they're in conflict. At minimum, as animals, physical existence requires us to acquire basic assets, food, water, clothing, shelter, etc., to survive. Over the long course of history, conflicts between individuals and civilizations are nearly unavoidable in the competition for resources, especially as global population and geographic density grow. Primitive life must have been stressful on the simplest organisms and mammals, not that it's easy now. Aggression must be a natural evolutionary trait, given that even the simplest life form requires some instinct to hunt for food, compete for a mate, and pass itself forward via procreation, and defend against other predators. Aggression can lead to violence, but violence and aggression aren't the same. Aggression is a cousin of competition. Without it, we would be docile, and we wouldn't survive as a species. There'd be no such thing as ambition and fewer unique, intriguing differences between people. Thanks, testosterone. Excuse me. Since some aggression is needed, the counterbalance of empathy is vital to mute potential excesses. Empathy is a form of love. Without it, aggression is a runaway train that destroys everything in its path, including itself. Most people are many potential beings in one package. Almost anyone is capable of violence under the wrong circumstances. When and where you were born contribute to which potential version of yourself you become, which is why good people can go bad and the rotten are never beyond repair. I really believe that. If you were born in a war-torn, impoverished country like, Afghanistan or North Korea, you would be very different. And I would too. People with a more liberal ideology embrace the idea that in a society we don't fully exist without other people, however imperfect we find them. This goes against almost all my own personal instincts, which steer me toward the fewest number of dependent associations. Yet, intellectually, in the most idealistic sense, I know that we all belong to each other. Conservatism advocates self-reliance and personal responsibility, which is undisputed. Yet life provides no guarantees. A person may believe he's prepared for every contingency, but fate may deal bad cards. We may unexpectedly find ourselves dependent on someone at a critical time. And to our credit as a species, often a person we barely know answers the call, helping us overcome an overwhelming threat. Sometimes someone you least expect might one day save your life. Altruism speaks to our common vulnerability. Yeah, for sure. I have trouble understanding people who lack empathy for the less affluent and disadvantaged. Yes, some people will always game the system and take advantage of government assistance. Waste and fraud are inevitable in any social system, but the poor are rarely living large even when they collect a government check. Looting by the elite is on a grander scale and has a greater impact on the health and the future of the country and world, and we have seen that in spades the last bunch of years. Their games can be more treacherous because they're highly intelligent and competitive. The recent bank and Wall Street bailout scams offended me much more than someone perhaps buying beer with food stamps. There may come a day, though hopefully not, when one of us might need the social safety net. And you could say with COVID that that time is now for a lot of people. That's what it's for and part of belonging to each other. If we never personally need it, the social safety net, and we pay more into it than we ever get out, we should consider ourselves fortunate to have never been in a situation that threatened our survival. What conservatives believe that liberals won't always concede is the violence of existence, the real politic versus the ideal. History has proven that not every conflict can be peacefully restored. In the modern nation state and a world of 8 billion people, the need for a strong military and an accompanying, though hopefully appropriately humble, nationalism can't really be escaped, because as idealistic as we might like to be, permanent world peace isn't realistic, so we strive for as much peace as possible. At least on Earth it's not realistic. Doesn't seem to be. War is partly a consequence of our competitive nature. Ambition and the desire to improve and grow, the qualities that help people achieve great things, sit on the flip side of aggression, our best and worst qualities rolled into one. Without ambition, there is no achievement or survival, which is kind of a repeat of what I said before, but you get the idea. Some communities have grown very hardened and accustomed to conflict. In inner city neighborhoods and countries torn apart by generations of war, nerves are worn. Daily life can be a matter of survival, and the empathy they were born with has been greatly compromised. The more sensitive the child, the greater the potential damage, because he or she will find it more difficult to keep strong negative feelings out. When a traumatized individual or community feels threatened, she may respond angrily and violently reflexive, like a wounded animal in pain. Unfortunately, conservative politicians sometimes exacerbate sensitive global conflicts by provocation and by seeing all human interactions as warfare. They seek and create the violence they fear. As in the March to the Second Iraq War, a perverse redirection of the strong feelings of sadness and anger elicited by the World Trade Center attack. The United States had little choice but to go to Afghanistan to pursue Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda, but Iraq was optional and based on faulty intelligence about weapons of mass destruction gleaned from torture, an affront to God. In our name, the U.S. military and private security contractors like Blackwater killed perhaps tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians, a minority of soldiers tortured prisoners. We plunged Iraq into extended instability, poverty, and misery. One can't just break a country, say, "I'm sorry," and expect it all to be forgiven. One quiet summer evening, lying on my couch, enjoying the sunshine and safety of the neighborhood, I wondered what it's like to be a child in tribal northern Pakistan, where the sound of American drones hidden among the clouds creates a constant hum, worrying that a targeting mistake may destroy my family in its sleep. What's our responsibility to these distant strangers? If we're indifferent to or unaware of what our government does on our behalf, do we condemn the politically weak to a life of constant fear? Are the insurgents, our military kills among the civilian losses, so threatening to our survival that we're entitled to make an entire region fear random death from above via drones? Yeah. I wrote a song about this actually recently since the book was completed, which is called Bleed and Feed. It's really about the military, industrial, entertainment, social media complex. It'll be on the next record in a few years. The extent to which the The extent to which military forces serve the interests of powerful American corporations and individuals is an open question, as is whether it's historically inevitable in every wealthy nation state. Capitalism and representative democracy, despite obvious flaws, work better than communism and socialism, which subjugate individual liberty and creativity and institutionalize corruption. But since Reagan and deregulation, abundant corporate takeovers and consolidation have created powerful companies that were simultaneously loyal to, dependent upon, and afraid of. The very wealthy are peers of the politically powerful. The two behave in a somewhat insular, self-reflexive fashion, even when their decisions have a great impact on millions outside their circles. Especially today in the unipolar world of a single superpower, although that's changing with China coming up. Politicians necessarily jockey for leverage among the rich and powerful, and this commingling can be treacherous. Despite daily news horrors, the United States is a more peaceful, integrated country than 50 years ago. The divide between the many racial groups that make us an eclectic nation has narrowed, and there are more rights for the LGBT community. To our credit, multiculturalism and tolerance have become part of the national character, though more in some regions than others. And I know it's ongoing, but it is, if you look historically at the country, I think you still have to conclude that it's still better and that there's more work to do still. We have a historical legacy of addressing and rectifying our national mistakes, though many individuals are victimized in the meantime. Excuse me. It's important in order to preserve a just society, and it matters in a moral universe. But ideological debates will probably be moot in the afterlife. A non-physical existence is presumably stress-free. We'll also see that no single viewpoint is ever the whole truth. On Earth, when operating from the most generous version of oneself, we make choices which better benefit the majority. We see others as our brothers and sisters because they are, even when we don't understand or like some of them. One thing is for sure, if you die, go to heaven, and come back to Earth, you will never have a life like this one again. And every micro moment that passes, you change ever so slightly, and the world changes too, plus the galaxy and universe, such that each version of you is a singular, fleeting phenomenon in time, never to be repeated or precisely duplicated. We don't see how we've changed with the world until we look back. Finite linear life is all change. It's nice to treasure moments of perfect joy, slow time, hold them up to the light. That's the end of chapter 32. So again, 38 minutes. This is longer than I had intended. That's the problem with tangents. I'm all itchy. I don't know what's going on with that, but you know me, I'm always itchy. So, excuse me, thanks so much for checking this out. Again, if you feel like leaving a question for my forthcoming tangents video, a question of any kind, unless it's just totally something that is way too personal, I will be glad to answer it. But I even answer personal stuff because I'm a too much information kind of guy as an artist type. And I think that's about everything. So thanks very much. Enjoy Easter and feel the love, right? Okay, bye.